Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to take one napkin and I'm going to show you two different ways to use it. Hopefully I'm going to give you ideas for maximizing the use of the napkins you have in your stash. So for the first project, I'm using my 9x12 Canson Mixed Media art journal. I've put a coat of gesso and I've taped off the edge. That's pretty much standard issue. Now this is the beautiful napkin that I'm going to use. It's called Campo de Lavanda. And you can get this at NinnysNapkins. The second project I'm going to do is I'm going to use that same napkin and I'm going to make a card out of it. Now making the card out of it, just using it pretty much as it is super simple. Both of these projects are super simple, perfect for the beginner. But on this one, I'm looking at the napkin a little bit differently. I'm loving the colors, I'm loving the patterning there, and I'm going to use it to create an Insta background. I'm going to use one half of it that way, and if I fold it this way, gone are the lavender fields. All this wonderful patterning and colors is what I'm going to put on the background. So to prepare the napkin, first you want to make sure that you take off the two excess layers. You can save these for adding texture, for stamping sentiments on. Just don't throw them out. You'll find lots of uses, and I've got videos showcasing that. You want to make sure you avoid putting any trademark stuff in the middle of your project. Now I'm just ripping off this white part in the middle because that's just kind of boring. I want all this rich color and the patterning that is here. So I'm just ripping that off, getting that torn edge, and voila, look at that. All this patterning, and it's super simple. Now that I know what I'm doing, I'm using my fluid matte medium. This is from Liquitex, and I'll put a link to in Amazon. And putting it down, I put a coat underneath, and then I put a coat on top. Now when you've put the couple layers of the matte medium on top of this thing, you're going to want to make sure it dries, especially if you plan on doing stuff on top of the napkin, because unless it's completely dry, it may rip and tear, which isn't the end of the world. There's always a workaround, but let's just avoid a problem. Giving that a good dry and ripping off a little bit more of this. There's just too much overlap and I don't need it. Now these little bits I could put in my accidental art journal and it would be the start of another page. So you really don't have to throw anything out. I love the kind of starburst pattern that the lavender fields gives. And there we have it. So I am going to set that aside and let that dry. So let's work on the card. So I just cut off one of the 4 sections of the napkin. When you order from NinnysNapkins, you get 2 of each napkin. Now I want to water cut the white off. And I'm using a liner brush with a very little bit amount of water. Now the secret here is do little bits at a time and way less water than you think. You don't need much. If it gets too saturated, your napkin, stop, let it dry before you rip anything off, because it in all likelihood would take off too much. And there, that's how it is. So this is a 5x7 card, and as you notice, if I go this orientation, it's not quite enough, but I don't like the short end. So I think, oh, you know what? I have the 6x6 folded cards from the Crafter's Workshop. I love that size. And it just seems to fit that better. So, you know, play around with the different substrates that you have. Now that I've decided which substrate, which card base I am going to use, I want to give this a coat of white gesso. That just prepares the card and kind of stabilizes it. It's kind of a primer. And again, pretty much standard issue for me. Keeps my options open for whatever technique I choose to use. Now I grabbed a sentiment from my stash, and I don't believe this one is part of any of my sentiment packs, although all my sentiment packs are available for purchase. They're digital, they're available at NinnysNapkins, and I'll put a link. Now I'm bubble cutting around this. I don't want as much of the white around it. And I chose this, it just seemed to, the font seemed to fit the feel of this card. Now, if you're not interested in the card, you can skip to minute 13 where I will finish on that art journal page. Now, while I'm doing this one on a card, you can do this exact same thing on an art journal page. So now that I have an idea of what I'm going to do, I need to colorize the top part of my card. And I grab Naples yellow, and I grab that because there's some of that yellow in the napkin. So I'm looking to the napkin to see what will go with it. I'm mixing that Naples yellow, which is one of my favorite colors. I highly recommend you add it to your colors. I'm mixing it with some white gesso just to get some different tones of it. And look at that, it's just perfect. And I'm just going to give this a good dry. I dry between layers whether you see it or not. I want to add more interest to the background, so I grab my French script stamp and I'm using my sepia archival ink. Now I'm taking this cypress tree stencil from the Crafter's Workshop and using white gesso. I just want to add more interest to the background. There's nothing special about this cypress tree other than the scale of it. This kind of looks like clouds in the sky. Any smaller stencil that has kind of movement in it would work. So look at what you have and use that. The goal is to make it look interesting. I don't want it just flat one tone. So I'm still playing with where I want the sentiment to go. Haven't quite firmly decided yet. Quite often, instead of making art journal pages, I make it into cards because then it becomes usable art and then I can just gift them away. So if people wonder, what do you do with it? That's one of the things that I do. And again, I'm gluing down the napkin onto the card base with a fluid matte medium, a coat underneath and then on top. And just a reminder, the napkin gets very fragile once it's wet, so you want to be gentle. Use a soft brush. Once it's dry, you'll cut off the excess. And if you make a hole, you can always patch it. Now it looked a little too pristine, so I grabbed my blending brush, and I'll link this in my Amazon store below. And if you're purchasing from other countries, there are 5 countries that you can, if you click on my US links, they will take you to your Amazon store. And you can still, I can still earn a commission on your purchases. So thank you very much. So then after using the sepia, I came around with the black. And this really grunged this up and made it more vintagey and just, it was the perfect thing to add to it. Then I grab my gold thinned paint and I'm just splattering with gold. And you're going to want to make sure once you splatter that you give it some time to dry because those globs of paint, they do take a little bit of time. So I decided I'm going to put the sentiment going down the one side and I grabbed the gesso instead of the fluid matte medium. Oops. Quick cleanup, and then let's proceed using the right product. Then I wanted to colorize the letters. They looked too white, so on this one I used the Naples yellow and lightly gave it a wash of yellow. Down here I used a purple and blue. I believe it was, and then I used green here. Just matching the colors as closely as I can to what was on the card base. And I'm adding some Naples yellow to the green. I'm adding some Naples yellow to the purple color. And I'm doing some shading with my black acrylic paint around the edge using my shading technique. There is a video where I teach how to do the shading technique. Just search in my channel for shading and you'll find it. I just wanted the edges to be a little bit darker, a little bit more rustic, vintage feel. And I'm adding a little bit of shading here. Just bringing out little parts of the picture, making it more my own. Both of these projects took about an hour. So they are quick easies and they're perfect for beginners. Don't require specialized products. You can make do with what you probably already have in your stash. I'm giving it an outline here with my black Posca pen. And then I'm going over the lettering just to make it a little bit bolder. Because once you put some paint on it, it tends to knock it back a little bit, dull it out. And we're done. Now with this one, I grab another napkin, also available at NinnysNapkins. This is called Three Sisters, and it's in part of the Indigenous collection. And I cut out two of them, and they're reversed. I love napkins that show that. And I grabbed a sentiment from my Embrace Possibility pack. And I'm not sure if I'm going to use both groupings of the sisters or just one. I'm undecided at this time. Now I've peeled off the excess layers from the backs of these napkins, and I'm going to glue them down onto copy paper. Now this is recycled copy paper. As you can see, there's stuff on the back. It doesn't matter. Now I'm gluing it down because the background is already done, and if I glued the napkin onto the background, some of what's on the background might shine through or come through the napkin, and I don't want it to distort the beautiful art that is these napkins. So in this video, we're using a napkin pretty much as it is. We're cutting out an image and using it as the focal point, and then we're using a napkin as a background. So we've actually used napkins 3 different ways. Now again, I'm gluing this down with my fluid matte medium onto just plain copy paper. Nothing fancy here. Once it's dry, I'm going to cut around it. And around the dress of the girls, I am just basically winging it. You don't have to be so terribly precise. If any of the edges aren't glued down, you want to take some time. Now I'm loving that background. And right now you could just put the focal image on and leave the background as it is. But I'm going to give you another option. I like the look of the Mandela stencil. It seemed to go with the spokes coming out from that lavender fields napkin. So I grabbed this Mandela stencil. This one's called Sunflower Mandela. And I'm using the purple and the Prussian blue. And I have to admit, when I put it down, I wasn't really happy with it. But I said, you know what? Embrace it. Go for it. I can't get it off, so I'm using it. And I want to make it a little bit stronger. And I'm working in groups of 3. 3 is always, your eye seems to like it. Played around with a different sentiment. Now here I grabbed some stamps. I wanted to add more to the background, kind of knock back some of that Mandela stencil by adding more layers. Here I'm using gold with this word stamp, and it's not working. I'm not getting enough patterning. I didn't want to be so bold with it, but here I'm getting pretty much nothing out of it. So I grab this Swiss Dot stencil from the Crafter's Workshop, use the gold paint, and I'm getting a little bit more oomph for my efforts. You can actually see the dots. Then I grab the Prussian blue, and I'm going to add some of the dots with the Prussian blue as well. So it's a dot stencil, a Mandela stencil. Edging the paper, I'll do some shading around there as well later, but I have some blue, some dark color on my paint, on my makeup sponge. Here I'm shading. I just love how that lavender napkin gave such an interesting background to us that we just tweaked. So now final decision time. Am I going to put 1 image or 2? Which sentiment am I going to use? I like my options. Whatever I don't use goes in a bin that I have there. I've got focal images, I've got sentiments. They just sit around and wait for another opportunity to be used. Because this is on copy paper, it's a little heavier. I'm using gel medium instead of fluid medium right now. I'm making sure everything is perfectly glued down. Coat underneath and a coat on top. The gel medium goes on kind of cloudy, but it dries clear. And there you can see the difference. So now I am going to shade around the focal image. I'm going on the background, not on the focal image, kind of giving it a shadow effect around it. And this is going to make the focal image stand out. And I'm adding a few darker lines on the napkin focal image itself. shading around the sentiment as well. I'm even shading around what I cut out a bubble cut. The purple I use is called Deep Violet. I finally remembered. Oh my goodness. Deep Violet and Prussian Blue. Adding a little more shading around there. And now I'm getting some white, and I'm going to add some highlights to the focal image, just to brighten it up a little bit and make it stand out. This page on the video is looking very dark. It's much brighter and more rich in real life, but some colors and just don't seem to photograph well. So I'm giving the tape a little bit of a heat. That'll help release it so you don't rip off the paper underneath. Little trick for you. And there we have it. One art journal page using the napkin as a background and another napkin as a focal image. And a beautiful card using the napkin pretty much as it is, but adding a bit of a background. I hope you give this a try. I hope you go to your napkin stash, look at them differently, and maximize the use of what you have in your stash. Until next time, go get creative.